Hello and welcome to our reading workshop using novels in the classroom. I am Bonnie Alinto.
And I'm Jessica Taramina.
Jessica Taramina is my co-teacher and we teach at UCT East Sales campus. We teach 4th and 5th grade. And today we're going to share some ideas on reading workshop and using novels in the classroom. Such a novel idea, don't you think so, Ms. Taramina?
Very.
Alright, before we start, I think it's a good idea that we ask ourselves some questions. I did some reading the other day by Lucy Calkins, and Lucy Calkins is a person who is kind of like the guru of reading and writing workshop in the classroom. And some of these questions I thought were really important. I think before we start our presentation, you need to sit back and ask yourself these questions. The first one being, how do we teach reading, or how do you teach reading in the classroom? And I'm not talking normal reading, I'm talking the heartbreaking, soul-searching kind of reading. The reading that makes you feel as if you are breathing some kind of new air.
Next question is, how do we teach the kind of reading that makes you walk through the world differently? Because a light bulb is no longer just a light bulb. Its filaments and industrial revolution and all that tumbles forth from that. You want your students to look further than further than the words on the paper and really be able to experience what they're reading.
And along the line of that question, look at the integration between science and social studies. It's pretty much the theme throughout this presentation because as we know, our time for teaching those areas, science and social studies, is non-existent. Basically, we have to start integrating into our reading. So how do we teach the power of reading? The way it allows us to see under the words, between the words, and beyond the words. And again, this question specifically is attached to Common Core and the new standards.
And the last question is, how do we teach the intimacy of reading, of belonging to a community that has a shared vocabulary, shared stories, and projects? You want your students to feel a connection with everything that they read and to be able to make the proper connections with the stories that they are reading.
So again, you need to sit back after you think about those questions and ask yourself, why should you change and modify the way you teach reading? And I'm going to tell you, I came from public school, and I know this is going to be a challenge for some of you. We have a little more leeway in charter school, but again, think about this. Why should you change or modify the way you teach reading? Alright, so we skipped a few questions. I want to just go back. It's not a slide, but I just want to talk about these questions. Again, I want you to examine the way you teach reading. According to that question, why should you change the way you teach? And just think about these questions. Why, if you do teach reading whole group?
Are you mimicking the way that you were taught? Are you used to sort of stuck in the way that you're used to and simply copying what you experience in the classroom yourself?
How often do you actually pull a student aside and ask them for input? And how would you like to read the novel? Or would you like to read a short story for a change?
How could you team teach with a colleague?
And that's something I'd like everyone to think about for a minute. Could you co-teach with a colleague? Do you have a teacher that pushes into your classroom, and do you pursue a co-teach model?
Yes, we do.
We do. And we do a good job if I must say so myself.
What instructional setting, large group or small group, works best for your students, and how do you know? How have you had the opportunity to observe your students, and what have you noticed that really works best with particular sets of students?
Yeah, some students might not benefit from a large group. Some students might. Some students might need a small group. So you need to pay attention to that as you ask yourself the question, do I need to change the way I teach reading? So again, according to the research, Allington and Hoyt are the two that I found pretty much that adhere to this. Plus, there's so much research on reading workshop and why it is positive. But some of the research says
one of the most important factors in reading development is time spent reading. It's crucial that you have your students, set aside a time of the day to really just read, because just throughout the school day we're so busy and we have so many things to put into our schedules that a lot of times people forget to include that.
Especially if you're using a basal series and you're mandated to use everybody reads the same story and then you have worksheet after worksheet after worksheet. Think about how much actual time is your student spent reading, and it's probably pretty minimal. An independent reading time combined with a mini lesson, conferences, learner responsibility, and feedback are strongly recommended, and that was from Hoyt. All right, now we're going to break down the traditional classroom versus reading workshop, and we have some data here that we're going to discuss, which pretty much breaks it down, the traditional model versus reading workshop. But we're just going to go through a few of these. Okay, let's go back one. All right, so in the traditional classroom, I noticed when I walk into a classroom to observe a teacher teaching reading, I notice that either it's a reading group or a whole class is reading.
I think with that they're reading together, that the whole group or the whole class is reading, the same text, maybe choral reading, things along those lines. As opposed to in a reading workshop, students are involved in independent reading and they're reading books on their level, their interests, and are really more engaged in what they're reading.
The other thing is, I've also noticed when I've gone in that students may only be reading during their reading group. When they're pulled into the teacher, that might be the only time they read for that whole language arts block.
Where in reading workshops, students read the entire reading workshop. They're reading during independent reading, they're reading while they're with the group, throughout the whole class lesson you're reading.
Okay. Now, also in the traditional classroom, students are given seat work when not in a reading group, and the seat work is usually a worksheet.
Not reading.
99% of the time, it's some kind of worksheet that just a time filler, so the teacher has some small reading group.
Where in reading workshops, students read independently, in pairs, and in small groups. And for some students, it's really great because students who are on different levels, that they're able to absorb or learn from the higher readers, and higher readers are able to appreciate those that maybe aren't reading quite on their level.
I also noticed in a traditional classroom that students are held back in reading. For example, the teacher has all the same students reading all the same way, all at the same pace.
And in reading workshops, students read at their own pace, so they're able to move ahead and reread as necessary. Just like in our classroom where each of our students is reading their own book, if they finish their book, they can go on to the next one as opposed to having to wait for the rest of the class to finish reading.
I want to continue with this comparison of traditional versus the reading workshop. I'm going to take the reading workshop side this time. Would you like to take the traditional side? Okay, so why don't you start with, and talk about direct instruction, how tasks and skills and strategies are taught in the classroom.
Okay, so reading is taught as a task to complete. You're reading simply to complete something as opposed to for enjoyment and just to read.
And to stay in the public school, I know, for example, stay in the same page, same day, same minute as your
the rest of your grade.
Right. One thing about reading workshop is reading is taught as a process. A lot of modeling is done through read aloud and teacher reading novels with students, so there's a lot of modeling of strategy.
Primary instruction on reading skills are in a sequential format, so everything kind of follows the same format every day, first, second, all the way to the end. And I think it also kind of gets boring for some students. The same thing is happening every day opposed to a reading workshop.
I remember a couple of years ago I had a class, and every single Monday we did a story, Tuesday we did vocabulary, Wednesday we did slang, and every Friday they had a test of stories. I had children in tears saying, please, do I have to take another test? And it was so redundant. And then you have a student that misses Friday, and then you're in trouble when you want to start on Monday, or you have a substitute. It's just a terrible way.
It's hard to stay on track.
Absolutely. So in reading workshop, your emphasis is on reading strategies throughout literature. So if you're reading a story that's really good at visualization, you're going to focus on that as you're reading your novel. And then again, you might not need visualization, so I might give you another book to use that would apply to a strategy that you need. So again, it's independent practice for what you need to be successful as a reader.
In traditional, typically basal type reading lessons, they're less interesting, and the instruction is less challenging for students. Because you're staying on one level, you're unable to really reach your higher students, and you're probably kind of above for your lower students. So you have, so many students that are lost, so many students that are bored, and you're only able to reach a limited amount of your students.
Versus reading workshop, where all readers are given exactly what they need to be successful. Your lower reader is reading where they need to versus your higher reader who's challenged and, again, not bored and increasing their knowledge.
And then students are not aware of teachers' reading processes and practices. Teachers aren't explicitly teaching the strategies. They're not explicitly teaching, what students need to know, or what they're supposed to be learning. Everything so right on with the table, or right on from.
Right. And also, what during reading workshop, teachers model. When our students are reading, we're reading, and then we're also reading everything that the children are reading. And what's more rewarding than sitting down with a student and talking about a book, a text that you're both reading, and getting those question levels up and really applying, synthesizing, so the students really understand it, because you've read the book too. I know right now in my own classroom, a bunch of us are reading The Hunger Games. And it's so fascinating to sit down with a student and really discuss those underlying themes, and it's so rewarding, and it's just so much fun. Don't you have fun doing that? It's fun. It's definitely fun.
And it makes it more exciting for them too, to see, oh, my teacher's reading, the same book, and
so cool.
As opposed to a basal where students aren't thinking, oh, my teacher's interested in this story too. It's kind of part of the lesson, as opposed to really reading and enjoying books with your students.
And enjoying books that are so much fun to read. Like right now, Hunger Games is so popular with our students. Our students are reading it, we're reading it together. It's exciting. It's not like the short story to get in the basal, which honestly aren't exactly top-notch favorite literature of children. Okay, just a few more things. We're going to talk about instructional practices, traditional classroom versus reading workshop. I'll take the scoring side now. Oops, sorry, I meant the traditional classroom side. Students are grouped by reading ability. I remember bluebirds and redbirds. Nowadays in reading workshop, it's not like that.
Students are grouped by level, by interest, or in flexible need-based groups. So you're able to really rotate your groups, get students working with different sets of students each day or each week, each night.
Round robin oral reading. Oh my gosh, I will never forget. I had a student who basically couldn't make out the words on the page, but it was their turn to read. Round robin. I just felt terrible for the student. Making them read out loud is just not good practice.
Silent and oral reading is used during reading workshop and discussion with teachers and the students. So, if a student is more comfortable silent reading, their silent reading when it's independent, as opposed to oral reading and having to be heard by the rest of the class.
In the traditional classroom, I'm going to say teacher makes all the decisions, administration and teacher together. To the student, seems like they make all the decisions. This story, this day, this worksheet, this test. But in reading workshop,
the students have ownership and responsibility for choosing their books, reading independently, using their strategies, and preparing for conferences. When your student is held accountable for so much, it's much more enjoyable for them, as opposed to kind of feeling like, they're just being told, do this, do that.
Mm-hmm. And let's just jump to assessment really quickly, because I think this is important. A lot of teachers have asked, okay, reading workshop, where are you getting your grades from, which we know is important. So just a few highlights there. In a typical classroom, you have typical test-taking format, read the book, answer the questions, usually in multiple choice format. And I'm not going to say that we get rid of that, because we still need practice in our state, which is the FCAT format, so they're familiar with that and there's no surprises. But in reading workshop, we do a lot of alternative forms of assessment.
Definitely. We can use anecdotal records. By listening to our students read, we're really, understanding where they are or not, fluently reading. And then we're able to do surveys with them and ask them questions and see if they are comprehending what they're reading. Then we also use journals, observations, and things like that.
And again, in the typical classroom, the traditional reading classroom, all students are assessed in the same manner. Doesn't matter what level reader you are, you're going to have the same test as the student sitting next to you. But in reading workshop,
while we do have some of the same assessments to practice for the state tests and things like that, we have different tests that we're able to use with every student. Some students are, just through surveys and oral discussions, while others are able to write down their thoughts and write down what they comprehended while they read.
Mm-hmm. And again, one other thing on assessment, a teacher in a traditional classroom has to follow the guidelines in a sequence. You're really not allowed to skip a story or go back to a story if the students don't understand it, which is very harmful, is not good practice.
If they miss something, they're kind of end up lost. Whereas in a reading workshop, we're able to make our decisions based on the assessment. If a student is not understanding something, we go back to that strategy. We reteach it to them. We work closer, to them with that. And if they do, those particular students are able to move forward.
All right, so now that we've talked about the differences basically between a traditional classroom and reading workshop in the classroom. Let's talk about the role of text in the classroom. And what do you visualize as you think of students using text in your classroom? Art?
So if you go into a classroom, you might see students reading, and you think that you would have students at their desks, students reading around the room, in book nooks and literature groups, in certain places in the room. Now, how do you think that you would imagine, or how do you see where you would place your students while they're doing reading?
Traditional pedagogy has been common in most classrooms of students all reading the same text, no matter what their reading level or their interest. And think about this question from how does that help children learn? You know, from your student that needs assistance to your, over-the-top child with that extremely high IQ. How does that child benefit from reading the same text as everybody else in the classroom? So again, we keep talking about text, but what counts as text?
Okay, the official definition of a text is a book or other written or printed work. It's important to consider, what not only what you see as a text, but what do your students consider as text also? Because our students see different things as plausible reading material.
Yeah, and I really found that out today as I did a reader's theater with some of my students, and I made the mistake of talking about some type of electronic device that isn't around anymore, like recording on a tape recorder. They had no idea what I was talking about. So you need to ask your students, what is text to them, and some examples were even notes to friends. How fun would that be to have kids write notes back and forth? They want to do it anyway, so let them write notes to each other, and then you stop and you read them, and you have them correct them, and talk about what's the main idea of that note they just wrote to their friend. Text, the phone.
The texting, it's true. A lot of people don't, you say read, and they assume it has to be a book. It has to be something that they find in the library.
Another one are comic books, or the new genre, not comic books, but graphic novels. Graphic novels. When I first saw one, I thought, oh, there's no place to look for classroom, but they are phenomenal. I would highly recommend you use graphic novels in your classroom, especially for your non-readers. They're so much fun to read, and there's so much learning that can be done through using graphic novels. And graffiti. Teacher taught once in the inner city, and I had a child who drew the most beautiful graffiti. That's text.
Absolutely. There are words, and they're able to express their ideas.
So how are texts used in the classrooms? We asked teachers at our school, and the answer pretty much was, it depends. It's different kinds of text depending on their pedagogical knowledge and belief. Everyone's answers were supported by the belief. All of their answers are good, but we need to make sure when we're teaching, it's motivating. We believe that reading is the key to all learning. We do a lot of science in our grade level. This year we give a science test. And an example, we did a practice test yesterday, and the reading level on that science test was very, very high. All reading.
At this level, you almost get to the point where a science test or a math test involves more reading almost than it does if that subject does not matter, because so much of reading is required, and the reading levels really need to be up to par to be able to do well on the test.
All right, so why should you use novels in your class? And we're talking about novels. We're going to talk a little bit that novels, we're not talking about 900 pages of boring. We're talking about short novels, short text, on the computer, all different types of text, not just what I would assume is a really long, boring novel.
And that comes down to what people see text as. You say novel, and they assume it must be this really big book, and I have to read that really long book. It's going to take me forever, but it doesn't have to be that way.
How many students, if you hand them a book, the first thing they look at is how many pages in the book?
Absolutely.
So you can do a short little novel. One of my favorites is Love That Dog. Love that book.
Okay.
It's written in poetry form, and it's just wonderful. And most of the students love animals, so that book always gets them. Children are active constructors of their own knowledge. I'm a firm believer in the constructivist point of teaching, and I believe that if I give a child a novel, a good story, a good context, they're going to construct their own knowledge. They're going to use their schema, they're going to build on their schema just from the book they've selected.
Children are also active participators. When they're reading novels, they're able to discuss what they're reading. They can participate in their learning because they're reading something that is interesting or motivating to them.
And most important, children can read on their level. How many levels do you have in our class? What do you think? Kindergarten, all the way down? Kindergarten to like a 7th grade reader.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
This
All
is
across the
probably
board.
the year that we have more levels in any class I've ever had. And so every child can read on their own level in that assessment.
Also, children can read about their interests. Again, motivation is key. If you give a child a book about something that they want nothing to know about, they're going to sit there and they're going to have a really hard time getting into a book. And by supplying novels or texts that are interesting to your students, they're really going to enjoy and get a lot more out of their time.
That reminds me of when my son was in high school. He had to read a story, and it was extremely difficult for him because he had no interest in it whatsoever. And I had to read it with him to help him maybe read it. It was tough. I thought it was really boring too, but so children can read about their interests. And how we do to find out their interests is, let's talk about our survey. At the beginning of the year, we give our children and our parents a reading survey. We ask one of the questions, what do you like to read about? What do you like to do outside of school, inside of school? What's your favorite food? Whole 2 pages of survey. And then we take a look at that survey and we take little note cards and we jot down. Beth likes horses. Sam likes cars, and we make notes like that. So as we're looking for books for these children to read, we have their interest level held high. And same with their parents. That was really interesting to find out this year about what some of their parents like to read or don't like to read. That was good, don't you think? There was a couple parents that said, I don't like to read. So we told them they need to take it with their kids. And as we all know, children can be social. What's more fun than doing a book group? Friends. And I can be a lower level reader, you could be higher level, but we could both be reading about horses and we both could be discussing horses. It doesn't matter. We're there, we're social, we're discussing the text.
It does provide a lot of common ground for students who are on different.
Oh, I see we have some questions from some other teachers that we jotted down here, so we want to take these questions now? All right, let's see what these questions are. All right. Who should be responsible for choosing classroom text? If students are given a role in choosing text, how can teachers expand their choices?
Can we talk about how we do it in our classroom?
Sure, absolutely.
In our room, we give students their Lexile levels, which are found
through their DRA. We always give a DRA test, which is a diagnostic reading assessment.
Developmental reading.
Developmental reading assessment. That's what I thought it was. You got it. And once we get that score on comprehension, fluency, we then apply it to find their Lexile level. And remember, be careful with your Lexile level. It's usually a pretty broad number. In some of the books, you still want to check, even if they pick their Lexile number.
Absolutely. If you look at a page of a book, you're more than likely able to decide if that's on the lower level or the higher level of where they are reading. And Lexile numbers, I mean, there's so many books in every Lexile number, so you can easily say, okay, go find a book on, with this Lexile number, and the selection is huge.
And this year we actually redid our whole library, and we probably have, I don't know, how many books do we have? It took us forever, but we Lexiled all of our books and we put them in baskets according to Lexile number. We used to have them by genre, but so many times we found students reading books that were either too easy or too hard. I've noticed that the Lexile is pretty much on par where they should be reading.
Absolutely. And also, if you're unsure of books what Lexile level they are on, you can just visit Lexile.com.
Yeah, Lexile.com is real
Simple.
easy. In fact, we had some students stay after school to help us organize our library, which was good for them too, because they were actually seeing the levels of all the different books. And curriculum. How do we choose our books? Curriculum is huge, and this is the integration portion. We just are doing a unit on government, so we were able to find quite a few books on government, and we're teaching social studies through reading. The way we're going to have to do it. Same with science. We talk about we have the leveled readers for science.
Trade books, absolutely. You have books on every aspect of science, every piece of the curriculum that you need to teach. There's some trade book on it, and they're also leveled. So you can use these resources that are unbelievable that will be able to match up to your curriculum.
Yeah, we take those little, even though they're little trade books, it's still text. and we'll put them right in the baskets along with the other story. So the children will pick that up just as quickly as they would. Versus if you told them, okay, today we're all going to read a science book, you know, you then get the moaning and the groaning, oh, I don't want to do that. But if you put it just in the library,
They see it's their level,
and they
their
take it
style.
and they read it, which is like a good way to integrate. How can all students' voices and perspectives be included in discussions of text? This is a good question because, again, you've got all the different levels, and how can we make sure that every child feels successful when we're discussing our books? In our classroom, we do start with an anchor chart, and we give them sentence starters. We say, okay, pick any sentence starter you'd like to, and complete it, you know, with your partner or with someone, you know, obviously with someone in the room, and apply it to your story. So it doesn't matter what they're reading, they are successful just by using the sentence starter. And I think I put the sentence starters in our next slide. I want to see if they're there.
Absolutely. And I really do feel like it ensures that everyone participates in some way.
For example, I'm reading a book called Ivy, June, Faith, and Hope, and today I'm reading it with about 4 other girls, and it was a really sad part of the story. So I used the sentence starter. The story made me feel very sad when I learned that her father wasn't able to go to his job because his car was broken. And we had a long discussion about what that would feel like. And all of these, you want to read a few of them?
Sure. I like the part when, and students are able to let you know, shows you their interest. If they choose that, they obviously are enjoying their book.
Okay. Yeah.
Gives you a little insight.
I was sad one. I wish I could. So these are really good. Anybody, any student, any level is successful.
Absolutely. And they don't need to share their level or share really much else about their book other than this one sentence to be a part of the discussion.
We also put this in their reading logs, which we'll share with you, so they have this available to them at all times. Besides on the anchor chart, and we do create this anchor chart at the very beginning of reading workshop, and we post it in the classroom, so it's right there for them. So there's no more choking or I don't know what
is the sentence starter? What do I use? They right away can look up there and join the discussion. The next question is, how can teachers integrate all curricular areas using novels?
This is a pretty easy one to answer. There's so much fabulous literature out there that does support your standards. After these questions, we will take you through just a couple of the units that we did create. Again, novels in the classroom supports Common Core if your state or another foreign country. I'm not sure, but if your state or country, wherever you are going to Common Core, you're easily going to be hitting the standards about deepening thinking, comparing and contrasting characters. That's an easy one to do in reading workshop.
Absolutely.
We have so many different characters. We easily pull out a chart and have them compare and contrast their characters. Discuss and reach for that deeper thinking is so easy to do when you have such a variety of literature in your classroom. You want to do this? I'm going to take a drink of water. Are you ready for this?
How can explicit instruction of reading strategies and skills? As mentioned, we do mini lessons through our reading workshop. So through your mini lessons, through guided reading with your students, you're really able to enforce and model every strategy that you want to ensure that they're using.
Stephanie Harvey has written a bunch of books on different reading strategies that we use to support our lessons in the classroom. She's another proponent of reading workshop, and she talks about different strategies and how they can be taught using a novel. And again, we do start with a mini lesson, and it's quick. It's mini. It's maybe 15 minutes max every day, and then the children are released to go and practice what you've taught with their book at their level. And strategy and skills are then reinforced again after IVR time through literature centers. And again, literature centers are also easy to differentiate amongst all your learners.
Absolutely, you can incorporate so many different things in each one. That everyone, also when they're in different levels at each center, they're able to assist each other, and also great.
I like this one. This one I had to put this question in because we have a lot of students this year that have started bringing Kindles and
their iPads.
all of this different technology are coming to school. And do we allow them to bring their own text to school? Yes, absolutely. It's amazing how much technology and how it's used
It really
in the
is.
classroom.
It really motivates them to want to read more because they're reading on this, piece of equipment. And even for our students who, are a little bit lower of readers, they're able to use the read aloud, and they bring in their headphones and they can listen to the book that they enjoy.
And one thing I have to say is I do have my own nook in the classroom, and it's so quick. If a student finishes, say, Hunger Games book 1, and all of a sudden they're just drooling to read book 2, I don't have to go to Barnes & Noble, I don't have to call the parent to get it. I can just download it, boom, right there on my notes. And the child keeps reading, so that momentum continues.
It never stops. That's right. They don't forget. They're so driven at that moment to just get into the next one, and you can supply it for them immediately.
That's a good thing and bad thing because it does cost us a lot of money, but again, they're reading, which is more important, to keep that momentum and that love of reading, or a little bit less in the textbook. I just tell my husband I read fast.
I do have an iTunes gift card.
Oh, well, use it then. Okay, that's good. That would be a good teacher present. We
About
could use
that.
those.
That would
Okay,
be.
all right, I like that. This is a tough one. How do you find enough materials to support the levels of readers in your classroom? And I have to tell you, I beg, borrow, and sometimes, and I put that in quotation marks, I steal everywhere I can find books. The library, I have such an overdue amount on my card. It's amazing, but oh well.
Garage sales really are fantastic, and the price is, great, and you're able to get so many books, without spending so much. But really everywhere.
Yeah, Scholastic Book Warehouse, when they have those summer sales, we always go and see if we can't grab books. And the library, your public library usually has a place where they're trying to get rid of books.
Oh yeah.
Quarter, 50 cents. So I get them from there.
And then people, friends, other teachers that maybe residential.
Yeah, look for teachers that are ready to retire. They always just want to get rid of them and take them.
That was the best thing when I student taught. I had a teacher that was retiring, so they just go through my library and take it off.
And take them.
Yeah.
Take them.
Don't feel bad.
Nope, take them. Take every book you can, and sometime or another you'll use it.
Absolutely.
All right, so now we're just going to go over our reading workshop and what it looks like in our classroom. We follow a schedule that looks something like this. We start every day with a read aloud. During read aloud, we're modeling all sorts of skills and strategies. And we teach 5th grade reading, and it doesn't matter. Read aloud is just as important in 5th grade as it is in kindergarten.
Absolutely. The one time that you really have all the students' full attention, where you can model fluent reading, asking yourself questions, and you're able to really discuss the book.
And we just finished reading the book Wonder, and it took us months, and it was so good. We had children in tears as we were reading that book. The emotions and the questions and the higher order thinking we were able to get from the children is just amazing. So again, we start with our read aloud. It's usually about 10 to 15 minutes. Then we go into our mini lesson. Again, 10 to 15 minutes. Very quickly, mini lesson is focused on skills and strategies. We hit all our standards during the mini lesson. And then we go into IDR time. Our children are assigned an area in the room, a book nook we call it. We change it every couple of weeks. I brought in my old soccer mom chairs. We have blankets, chairs, pillow pets, bean bags. The first couple weeks we just practiced getting our book nooks out without tripping over someone, and where this is your area where you'll set up. So management was a little important, getting ready for IDR. And we're supposed to read about 25 minutes, but we're up to like 40, 45 minutes, and children are begging us when the timer goes off to keep reading. And that's very hard. After IDR time, we go back to our desk and we do a real quick reflection, and that's where we use our sentence starters and our discussion pieces. We quickly talk about what we read. It's a good place for us to take a quick anecdotal note on who's reading what and where they are in the book. One thing I will warn you, I have seen once or twice this year, is a student has read the same book for too long, which signals to us, number one, there's those fake readers, which we need to watch out for. Yeah, or the book's just too hard, and they think it's school because they're reading it. So you just quickly change it. Really not what to do. And then the end of it, we go to centers. And during centers is when we pull for guided reading or one-on-one instruction with the child. We need some help.
I do want to say too, if you do have a student who is reading a book or not reading a book, because it's too difficult, it's just not on their level. We do also, our students always have 3 or 4 books in their book boxes.
Yeah.
So if a book does end up being too difficult, or they find that they're not quite into it, they're able to just put it back and then select another book that they already have pre-chosen.
Yeah, that's one of the requirements. They have to have 3 to 4 books in that book box. And I bought really cheap book boxes on sale at, am I allowed to say I bought them? At Kmart. They were the ice cube trays. You know, the old-fashioned refrigerator, but the old refrigerators we used to put the ice in. They were on sale. I think they were 75 cents a piece. So I bought those.
And they work.
Perfectly well. All right, so how did you begin? How did we start this year? Whew. Okay, again, it's essential that you take the first couple of weeks to establish routines. Classroom management plays a huge role in classroom.
Without it, I don't think it would work.
No.
It really just would be too much on the students because it does put a lot of responsibility on them, and they are held accountable for.
But
everything.
I've seen reading workshops that's successful in first grade without a problem. Children know what to do. They know where to go to read. They know how to choose their books. They know where to keep their books. They know how to log in and out, and they know what to do with that reading binder. But again, you should take, just like you do for anything else, teaching routine, the first couple of weeks to establish your mini lesson.
Make sure they really know what is expected of them.
One of the things we spent a lot of time on this year was figuring out what we wanted to put in their reading binder. That binder goes in their box and goes with them as they go to their book nook and back and forth. I'm changing this constantly as I'm finding new pieces of information, but I'm just going to show you what we have in our reading binder.
And that does show the ease of it, being able to just, pick something new and put it in, and they can easily all just stick it right into their notebook.
So everybody has their cover with their reader's notebook and their name across the bottom. And then we have the children, we bought these little plastic pouches. And in here, they're required to keep a highlighter, various bookmarks or sync marks. We've been giving them throughout the year. And sticky notes. Love sticky notes. So lots of sticky notes going here. And usually a pencil or a pen goes in there. The next thing they have in there is their bar graph where they keep track of the genres. One thing we really tried to do this year, and which is the Common Core standard, is to get them to read at least 1 or 2 books from each one of the genres across the bottom. And you can see a little integration of math in there as well. Absolutely. We did put a genre overview in here so the children that weren't familiar with all the genres have them right here. So they also have the code, which goes on another form I'll show you.
And that's great for even those that, those that do know it, but those that aren't aware of it, they're not the only ones that haven't singled them out. They all have the same things that are beneficial to all of them.
After they read a certain genre, then they put the title of the story that they've read underneath each genre so they can look back and reflect upon what they've read. Yeah, this is like a hack. This is one of our students that I just grabbed in the classroom. Other thing we like to do is during mini lessons, we have them take little notes, little bullet notes. And here is just a very simple chart. You put the date and the topic, for example. We did a lesson on clarification. What do you do when you come to a word you don't know? And she just put some strategies underneath it along with the date. So again, it's just some boxes, and they just fill in the boxes as we teach it.
And it's good for reminding them what the lesson entails, and then letting us know that they were, in fact, paying attention.
And here's your IDR log. They log in. They put the date, the title of the book, the author. Here's that genre code right here. The Lexile number of the book she's reading, and the pages read, the number of pages that she's read this year, and she's pretty full. She's done quite a few. As you can see. Another thing we put in here we talked about what do you do when you come to words you don't know. I noticed that's one of the hardest things to teach because some children just read the word and think they know it, and they don't hear that it's not right. Absolutely. So we've been working this year on a lot of how do you know when the word's not right? How do you know that you don't know that the word's right? So again, it's called self-monitoring, and you need to stop and ask yourself, did that make sense? And we've gone through a lot of different checklists and monitoring flow charts on what they can do when they come to words they don't know. And then also, while they're reading, we have another thing that's called IDR book discussion points. As they're reading, if there's a question they have, they write it down on here so that we know when we conference with them that we meet and discuss that. And then they have IDR response. Again, here's our thinking stems that we talked about. And this way, I've broken it down into different strategies so they know if we're talking about asking questions. There's a bunch of different sentence starters for them to use. Predicting, synthesizing, evaluating characters, all sorts of different skills and strategies here. And then we have our center time. In all of their center, I have directions in here, so their task card is in here, along with any work that they've completed goes behind that section. And then we have a tab for guided reading, so they know if we pull them over for guided reading, this binder comes with them and all the information stays here. So this is a great tool for students to use, but I think more importantly, it's a great tool for a teacher to take.
Absolutely, to assess
and data, yeah, what's
where
going
your
on.
student is.
Ooh, that is like our library. That's a nice library. I like that one. Kind of high though. All right,
Yes,
so
I could
before
put it in.
choosing novels, what do you do? And we talked a little bit about this, but you need to assess. Again, use a GRA. We'll also use a running record if we need to, or a QRI. We have all three of those materials available to us. And we pretty much give them a little lexile number from there.
You have to ensure that you have books on all of your students' levels. Now, if you don't check and make sure and assess where they are, you're not able to really provide for all of your students because those students are on so many different levels. So then you choose how you want to organize your library. We said last year we did it by genre. This year we did it by lexile levels. And I too feel like this year with the lexile levels, you have so many genres in every lexile level. As opposed to before, they might say, I only like this genre. So they only even really get to look at those titles. Whereas this way, they see so many titles in their lexile level and are more likely to choose something other than what they are used to reading.
And we put the lexile right on the, not the spine, but on the top of the book and mark it so it's easy for them to see. I also, if you notice in our picture, that's not really a great way to set up a library because all they're seeing is the spine. We always put our books front forward so they can look this way through the book and look at the cover. We say don't choose a book by a cover, but I do it.
Absolutely. Sometimes that's what first grabs your attention.
Absolutely. Again, reading surveys, we do that the first week, actually the first day of school, we did it this year. It gives us time to read through them. We did the parents at open house, and I have to tell you to try that. That was very, very interesting what they responded to us. And again, you need to find time for the students to select books. Also for us, we spend time at the end of the day. If I hear a student say, boy, I love this book, I'm going to go out and find another book along that theme and I put it right in their book box.
Then we are able to go get the other one. And also, by giving them ample time, they're able to make sure that they have 3 or 4 books in their book box that they really will enjoy and have chosen on their own.
Yeah, another thing we like to do is we'll put a sticky note on the book and say, I found this just for you, or great reading, or, let's blog about this later on our computers. Like, oh, we should talk about our blogging. We have a great website that the students go to. Instead of a reading log, which I don't know about you as a teacher, it gets a little tedious, doesn't answer.
Very messy, difficult to go back to.
Where's your log? Where's your log? We found that 99% of our students have computers at home, and they're on there anyway playing those games. So we decided to try doing a blog this year. And they're responsible to blog or respond to a blog, and it has been amazing. We had 126 posts last week. And we do it every week. We start a new one. And then we'll go on and blog back to them. It's going to be a lot of fun.
It is, and we're able to assess so much that way too. They're writing, if they're understanding what they're reading, they're able to ask their classmates questions. There's so much that you can see by looking at their blog.
And we have parents blogging with us, which is also a lot of fun. And right there. I just want to talk about, I mentioned Read Aloud, and again, we teach 5th grade. However, the research indicates that reading aloud to children, no matter what age they are, improves their reading skills. And why is that? It's vision modeling and their hearing fluency, which is so important. And Jim Trelease, the big guru read aloud. There's this research right here. Because in reading aloud, we condition the child's brain to associate reading with pleasure, we create background knowledge, build vocabulary, and provide a reading model as you use a parent or teacher to relate to them.
So yeah, it's just one time in a day where they just get to listen to it.
And it's so important. And again, talk about integration. Well, you can pick this up.
Oh, absolutely. At any level, any
So
curriculum
easy.
area.
A little bit more from Jim Trelease on the research. I won't read it to you. We'll take a pause now and talk. One point I'd like to make is that second bullet. Children listen at a higher reading level than they read. Take a minute and just think about that. You know, you have students that are really struggling and they're not able to read at a very high level, but they can listen. So, you know, it's your job. Boy, what you can expose them to so much more material than they can on their own for reading. And you can read that book, Wonder, it just keeps, you know, flashing in my mind. What a fabulous book for children to discuss.
Absolutely, their conversational levels, or their reading levels aren't always their conversational levels, and it kind of comes down to that same thing, to be able to listen to something different than.
In our ELL learners, think about all of our other, you know, what a great benefit it is
Great
to
for
them.
their conversational skills.
Absolutely, so good research there. Just a few quick, I like the way she changed it. A few read aloud guidelines. This one's important. Not all books make good read alouds. I have to tell you, I'm reading one now that is a really great book to read on your own, and I'm doing it as a read aloud. And I'm about to abandon it just because it's really boring me. And if it's boring me as a read aloud, I'm sure it's boring the students. And it's okay to model that. I'm going to say, you know what, guys, this isn't really working. I'm going to abandon it and try something else. And you know what? It's really fun. Some books, you can skip boring parts, and I've done that as I'm reading. But as I'm reading it ahead, I'm noticing I'm probably skipping parts I shouldn't.
Important parts.
Yeah.
So not able to make those
Yeah.
jumps.
We had a student intern not too long ago actually did a read aloud for our class, and we don't usually like to give that up, but I thought let's try it. She's a senior intern, let's give her a chance. And she actually didn't show the illustration. So we're in the back of the room screaming and squirming in our chair. Thinking, no, but so remember, always show illustrations and allow time for class discussion and read books with prosody. Again, different voices, smooth reading, enhance those characters.
Absolutely.
Have fun. Read aloud stuff fun.
And you want to show them how they should be reading and hearing, there's even independent reading in their heads. And also by allowing time for discussion, you can just ensure that they're, picking up on the background knowledge and that you're actually enhancing their knowledge as opposed to.
Right. And another thing about read aloud, we do this in our class. It's snack time. It's a good time for snack time. Kids sit at their desk, they have a nice little healthy snack, and they get read to.
So that's off the chart.
We have, Common Core has what's called I can statements. During read aloud, I pass them out on strips of paper, and each student has an I can statement. And after read aloud, we don't, I'll just tell the student, read your I can statement and apply it to the read aloud. Something to do during read aloud. Also, there's 10 cooperative learning structures that we use.
Absolutely. If you're not familiar with them, one is Zip Around, and they really just ensure that all of your students are participating and feeling a part. And, they build community in your classroom. So Zip Around, just they look at their I can statement and you zip around the classroom, just as it sounds.
And everyone gets a chance to talk, and they can take turns. 4 corners. We'll pose 4 different questions, and if they want to be the expert in that question, they'll go to the corner in the room and they'll just talk with that group about their expertness.
And then Rally Robin is another good one. It's usually used for things where your students are asked to list things or have multiple answers to something, and you just pair 2 students and they go back and forth with their ideas. And it's great because it really allows students to kind of see the value in one another also, because they're able to learn from each other.
Okay, I just put my top 5 read aloud. all, anything by Barbara Robinson is hysterical. The best worst Christmas pageant ever. That's always a fun one to do about October, November. Molly Bannicky is a great book written by Alice McGill. Molly Bannicky was either the great-grandmother or the grandmother of Benjamin Banneker. It's a very interesting story for children. There's Wonder, our favorite. Of course, Number of the Stars by Lois Lowry. And this is a really old story. It's called The Last of the Really Great Winged Eagles by Julie Andrews Edwards. The hills are alive, the hills are alive. Anyway, that's another good one to use. Just a couple of my top 5 read alouds that I do. Okay, we'll talk a little bit. We mentioned we were talking about some of the novel studies we've done. We've done a few by genre. So we started with realistic fiction, and look at that range of authors: Judy Blume, Cynthia Lord, Phyllis Reynolds, right there. You can all get realistic fiction in across the Lexile board.
Absolutely, at any level. There's no limit to any amount of students that you can provide realistic fiction books for, and ensure that they are at the reading level.
And everybody's reading realistic fiction. Everybody's discussing questions that apply. It's just a great way. And why did we start with realistic fiction? It's easy to make
connections. They seem to enjoy them.
Yeah,
most
I
about
think
others
so
because
too.
you can
They
really
really
connect
make
them.
a lot of connections. And then again, Shiloh, Lex has 890, that's Phyllis, and then Rules is Cynthia Lord, and Judy Blume ranges the Super Fudge books from 400 to 600. So you can see the range 400 to 900 is just pretty much across our classroom, and there's so many more authors that are available for realistic fiction. Now we're talking about historical historical fiction, again, the same idea. Look at those stories, Ethics for Freedom, Number of the Stars, Anne of Green Gables, and January Sparrow. Again, a huge range of Lexile, all reading historical fiction.
Absolutely. It shows you that just because a book is, books in historical fiction books can be out for higher readers, and that maybe lower readers won't have something that they'll be able to read, but it shows that really across the board, all levels.
One thing we did in October, of course, was scary, and it was a lot of fun. Any book written by Betty Wren Wright, I can't recommend her enough. It's really scary. Not too scary for a 5th grader, but to me, they're all scary. And then, of course, don't forget Goosebumps, R.L. Stine. You can't read Goosebumps. Again, big Lexile range there. And that's really it. We're going to wrap it up here. Again, we just want to say using novels, short text, any type of text is a way to make sure your students are engaged, interested in reading, and consequently,
they will learn.
And they'll love to come to school, and they'll love your reading. And that's how